What's up? It's your boy Tommy D, the Nonprofit Sector Connector. The name of this program is Long Island Changemakers. On the front lines, business professionals, nonprofit professionals here on Long Island, my hometown, doing very important work, and it's my job to spotlight that work. I have two friends with me today on the show, Dr. Ellenmorris Tiegerman and Dr. Christine Radziewicz from Tiegerman. What is going on? Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I mean, listen, you know what? You see that movie, Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
Of course.
So in that movie, at the end of the movie, Willy Wonka says to Charlie, they're up in the elevator, he had just given Charlie the factory, and he said to Charlie, don't forget what happened to the little boy who got everything he ever wanted. And then Charlie says, what was that? He goes, he lived happily ever after. So I get to live happily ever after. I'm pretty blessed. So thank you for asking. I'm glad to have you both here. You have an incredible story. Together, 40
Yes.
years together of
Yes.
building this incredibly important
Yes.
organization. And I'm just, I live not far from the school, from Tiegerman. And I used to pass by, and at different points in my work in nonprofit, I started to come around, got involved with some events. I had some friends on the board. And I think in terms of neurodiversity, right? And for so many different people, we learn differently, right? But I think often the school system and educational system tries to teach people one particular way.
Yes.
Right? Doesn't
Yes.
always work, right? It's
No.
not, you know, what's good for some is not good for all. That's what I've learned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I thought we could do is start out with the story. Why Tiegerman? Why does it even exist? Not your name, but why? Why does the organization exist? And maybe we talk about the Tiegerman learning methodology and all this type of stuff and the work you two have done together over the last 40 years.
Okay.
And 40 years is an important number, right? Because this is an anniversary year?
Yes, this is an anniversary year. We started in 1985.
Oh my goodness.
But my story really starts when I was a child. So when I was about 8 years old, I was in a park with my mother, and my younger sister, who was about 4, was walking up a slide.
Okay.
And at that time in the park, they didn't have rubber, mats on the ground. It was all cement. And she fell off the slide. She was in a coma for several weeks. And when she came to, she lost all of her speech functions.
Oh my goodness.
Okay? And the family really imploded. Because at that time, we're talking late 1950s, early 1960s, there were no services for children with disabilities, and we were a relatively poor family living in a project in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights, which is the setting.
Yeah.
And my father decided that since she could not go to public school, my sister, he was going to teach her himself.
Wow.
So he was a clerk who worked for the State Insurance Fund. He had no experience in education. He put me in the back seat of his car, and we took a ride to New Jersey to Heath Company, which was this huge book company that did educational books. And he took money from his pension, and he purchased all of these textbooks. And every morning I would see him with a pad. He would take a book with him, and he'd ride to work. He'd come home with notes. He'd take my sister and put her at the dining room table.
This is after a full work day.
This is after a full work day, okay? There was an ottoman in the living room, and I would sit on the ottoman and I would watch him.
How old were you when this
I was 8.
You were 8.
I was 8.
But you were there witnessing and watching and learning what he was saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was my life lesson. This is what changed my whole life. This was my transformative experience.
Oh my goodness.
And I watched him work with her for 12 years. And when she graduated high school, she gave him her diploma and said, Mommy gave me my first life, you gave me my second. And when I had an opportunity to start a school in 1985, I opened up a preschool program for 36 preschoolers in Great Neck. Okay? And I had people who helped me. Tom Galata helped me.
Tom Galata, sure.
Dean Scalos helped me. He was in the Senate. Tom DiNapoli helped me. He was in the Assembly.
Yeah.
And I got the program started, and I never looked back.
So let me stop you here for a second, because that dogged determination that your dad had translated into the work you're doing, right? I mean, you're talking the 1950s and 60s. Your sister could have ended up in what we called an institution back then,
Yes,
right? That's what they're
yes,
probably
absolutely.
prescribing,
We
right?
I have to tell you, Tommy, we took a ride upstate,
Yeah.
okay, and I went with my father to take a look at a residential placement for children with severe disabilities. And it was a nightmare.
Of course it was. We
right?
all know the
and
stories.
I said, don't put her there. Don't put her there. Bring her home.
Yeah.
Bring her home.
And you were a baby, though. You were 8 years old
I was
saying
8
that,
years
right?
old.
Yeah.
Yes.
My goodness. Okay.
But look what I saw. I saw this wonderful experience. He adored her.
Yeah.
He worked for years with her. He made a commitment.
Unbelievable.
He was
But
persistent.
he made that as a choice, though. In life, we
Yes.
have these opportunities to make a choice, right? And he was, again, he was not an educator.
No.
Right? So he taught himself the skill. Being a parent, right? You just know what that is, where you'll do anything for that child. And this man did that, and that's incredible. And when 1985 comes along, I know a bit of the story. So the preschool is created, and then as the children started to get older, what happened?
Well, first I met Dr. Radziewicz.
I was
I
gonna
met
ask
her.
you that. Tell me that.
Okay. We worked together at Adelphi University
Okay.
in the Speech and Hearing
Yes.
Center, right? And I adored her. She was one of the most brilliant women that I ever worked with.
What were you doing
okay?
there? Why were you at Adelphi?
I was the director of the Speech and Hearing Center,
Okay.
and she was the assistant director.
Okay, got it.
So we worked together for a couple of years, and then I opened the school. And she went off to work in a school district,
Okay.
and I went off to work in this preschool program, and I pursued her for months. I
Sure.
ran after her
Yeah.
to get her to come and work with me.
As a full-time employee initially?
Yes,
or- yeah.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Even getting started like that, I mean, you had other opportunities in front of you, Dr. Radziewicz, that you could.
She had a phenomenal career
Right. Yeah, that's tough.
as a speech-language pathologist herself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. So what happened, Dr. Radziewicz? Why did you were being pursued?
Yes.
Why'd you say yes?
Because I recognized that what she wanted was something beyond anything I could find in the schools. She was so passionate, and she wanted to do something that was good. She wanted to make a difference. And although I never thought that I could make a difference, I had a much smaller vision of what my life would be like. I realized that I had to hook myself onto her star.
No kidding. Yeah.
And that's how we did it.
So we started together. We never looked back. And we were very, very fortunate because if you look at Tiegerman, we start off in preschool. We go all the way up through high school. And we also have adult services. So we are a lifelong program.
Sure.
We go through the life cycle process. We provide specialized programming to children and adults with developmental disabilities on Long Island and in New York City.
In the time period you've worked together, so I had, unfortunately, I lost my cousin, Linda, maybe 11 or 12 years ago. And Linda had, we used to say special needs. As a society, we used to use other words that were worse than special needs. And, you know, having Linda as part of our life was really a change in my world, right? Because Linda was always there, so we were always connected to people with different abilities. I don't think everybody had that opportunity, and I feel like now, as a society, we're more aware.
More inclusive.
We're certainly more inclusive.
More inclusive.
Right? But I think we're just even like more aware that there are people with these different abilities. I look at, you know, they say, obviously, autism is a spectrum. I believe we're all on a spectrum, whether it relates to mental health or whether it relates to the way we learn. I think we're all on a different spectrum. I don't know what normal is. That doesn't even sound like a real word to me, normal. Like, what's normal, right? Everybody has different ways they learn. I want to hear about the methodology and how it has evolved over the years, because things are evolving,
Yes.
and how you work in tandem as a team, and certainly in the organization.
Well, first of all, I grew up in a special needs family.
Sure, right.
Okay, so that was the first family, my family. And Tiegerman is a family,
Yes.
okay? And that's what we provide to our families, the sense that they are going to be empowered just as I was empowered, my sister was empowered, okay? They're going to be empowered, all right? So Dr. Radziewicz and I are both speech-language pathologists, and as a function of that, our mission is all about language intervention because we deal with children who have language disorders.
So that's,
right?
I've understood that, and in speaking with Dr. Jeremy, your son, that speech and the language was always the basis and the tenets
Yes.
for what this organization is all about.
Yes.
Yes,
It's the magic thread.
it's the magic
It's the
thread.
magic golden
Why?
thread.
Tell me about that.
Because language is what brings us all together. It's how we process information, and it is how we communicate.
Yeah,
Without language, life would be very dull.
sure.
I'll give you an example.
Please.
If you didn't have language, if you saw a beautiful sight, try to imagine what would be going through your mind.
Well, I'm using words in my mind, so if I didn't have
There
them,
you
I don't
have
know
it.
what I'd do.
There you
Right?
have it.
There you have it.
Oh, wow.
So language is a software program.
Yeah.
Language
Okay?
is a software.
Language is a software
I got to
program.
interrupt you. You know what's killing me right now? I like to write everything down. I want
Right.
to take all these notes. I'm going to have to go back and watch this
But
program.
you're using your language system.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
You're using your you're using
Yes.
your words, using your language system.
Software
So
program.
what makes us distinctive as a program is that everything that we do in the classroom, okay, everything that we teach, everything that's coordinated between the teacher and the speech language pathologist, the teacher and the occupational therapist, the teacher and the physical therapist, everything involves language in the classroom, language infusion. We do not teach children about circles and squares and numbers. We teach them how to have conversations, how to tell stories, how to ask questions. We are all about teaching children about conversation. Because when you can have a conversation, you're using your words socially. And that's
different
what's
is that-
important.
How different is that than the traditional method of going to school where you're going to learn this is A, this is 1, this is a circle? Like,
It's not engaging.
what goes on in other schools is not
Right,
as
it
engaging.
is not engaging. Okay, they can identify a circle.
Sure.
But what we want is for the child to talk about the circle
Yeah.
and to talk about that circle to their friend, to ask a question to their teacher. We really want our children to learn how to be very engaged in the world and how to learn through their interactions in the world, not rote learning.
Sure.
It's really about what makes us human. You know, you just said something very interesting, and I want to get back to this idea of words. You said you like to write everything
Yeah.
down. Guess what? If we had an MRI of your brain, if we were looking at your brain, guess what part of your brain would be lighting up?
I don't know which part.
The language part.
While
you're
well,
writing.
I know for a
Absolutely.
fact, like if I write things down, it's going to help me remember them, and that's
Exactly.
my learning
That's your
strategy.
method.
That's
That's
my
your method.
right?
Yes.
They
Your
call that the
method.
Tommy D method.
Okay.
So I want to ask you this, like immersive, and we'll get back to this golden thread of language. Immersive, when I hear like, so I bought, many years ago, I bought Rosetta Stone. You know, that's like, it's a
Yes.
box, it has a bunch of CDs. It looks very nice. I have it up on a dresser. It's like still in the box. If you don't take the discs out, nobody even has CDs anymore. People don't know what I'm
Right.
talking about now. If you don't take the discs out of the box, you don't learn, right? You actually had to put them in. My point is, immersive though, is where you're using the language. And I remember I studied
Yes.
Spanish growing up in junior high school and then in high school. And I worked in restaurants and bars for a long time, so I would speak to the guys in the kitchen and we would speak some version of Spanglish. It was a little bit English, it was a little bit of Spanish, and we sort of met in the middle, right? But there was the utility of the language.
The experience.
I can't speak
The
Spanish
experience.
anymore, man, right? But I could when I used it because of the
Right.
experience and this relationship and connection. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, so it's the expression of language, it's the comprehension of language, and it's the experience of language. And when you immerse children
Yes.
in that experience, they learn how to use the language.
When you immerse children
In the
that experience, they learn how to use the language.
how to use the language.
So when
and
we-
that's our method. That's the
That's the
Tiegerman method.
So when you talk about, when we hear about like my son or daughter was nonverbal or is nonverbal and things like that, can we talk about maybe some anecdotal stuff that the Tiegerman learning, it's called TLM, Tiegerman learning
Yes.
method?
Yes.
What, can we talk about some of those anecdotal stories that maybe happened over the last 40 years?
Sure. So one story that I would share with you, and
Please.
then Dr. Radziewicz will share a story, is I had a young man who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders, and his name was Sean, and I had him in elementary school, and he went all the way up through the program, right? And he acquired more language and more facility with language usage over time. He was more interactive socially, all right? And his mother calls me up because he's graduating from high school, right? And she says, would you like to see Sean before he goes to school? Remember, he had autism, right? So I said, of course, send him. So I meet him downstairs.
Oh, he's going away to college or something?
He was going away to college, going away to school. And I meet him in the hallway, and I go over, and I'm going to give him a hug, hello. And he says, Dr. T, don't touch me. I don't want anybody to touch me. So I said, okay. Okay, come downstairs, and we'll meet some of your teachers. And we come downstairs, and we're talking to him about his high school experience, and I say to him, where are you going? What college are you going to? So he said to me, I'm going to Stanford University. I said, really? What are you going to study? He said, nanophysics. He said, nanophysics. I said, so listen, I was upstairs, I was going to give you a hug, and you said, don't touch me. How are you going to deal with the university experience with hundreds and hundreds of students and peers? So he said to me, I go to class early before anybody else, or I go to class late. He said, and that's how I deal with all these experiences. He said, I figure out what is going to upset me, and I come up with a strategy so that I don't have to deal with it. So I said to him, that's really fantastic, and tell me, what exactly are you doing in the physics department? So he said to me, Dr. T, I have a secret for you. He said, a lot of people in the physics department are like me. And I have to say that we all started to laugh, but it really highlights the fact that he had enough language and social experience that he was able to understand himself, what he needed, what made him uncomfortable, and by self-regulating, he was able to figure out a strategy so that he could fix the situation. Get to class early before anybody else, or get to class late.
Yeah, strategy, right? Self-regulation. He knew what it was that was going to create the challenges and problems for him.
Absolutely.
So,
but that's
and he had the language to bring that to you.
It's all about language and communication.
It's all about language and communication. It certainly is. And I think if we all could communicate better, we'd probably, as a society, be better off.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of challenges, and I find, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but like, if the three of us left the studio here and we saw a car accident, right, and we were all watching it, and we tried to tell the policeman or policewoman who came by, we would tell all different stories of the same thing that the three of us saw.
Right.
And I think in an hour later, we tell a totally different story. So eyewitness is not always the best, right? In communication, we may be in a dialogue right now, and we're not hearing what the other person is really saying, right? And they may not be hearing what we're saying. Communication is critical. This is so important. You know, I drive by the building all the time. I know Dr. Jeremy. I know some of the folks on your team. But this story that we're telling now doesn't always get told, and I think it's critically important for nonprofit organizations to tell the stories like you're doing. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for all you do. Dr. Radziewicz, what about you? Tell me a story in some of the experiences. I mean, 40 years, thousands of children, right?
I will talk about a child that I worked with. She had a severe hearing loss, and I was very involved with her family because she really was a bit of a problem. She was not on the spectrum, but she really had a behavior problem. And I'll never forget the first time I started working with her. She was not yet, and that was before we had cochlear implants. So she had hearing aids. But if you know anything about hearing aids, when you have a severe hearing loss, you do not get the same kind of message that you get now with the cochlear implants. And I remember when I would work with her, and I would always have her mom in the room with me, when she didn't want to work, she would simply, and I always laugh about this, close her eyes. And once, because she had a severe hearing loss, once her eyes were closed, she could retreat into her own world. She didn't have to engage or interact with me. And I can remember saying to the mom, talk to the audiologist. Tell her, make sure that she's wearing that hearing aid all the time, Mom, because kids would like to take them out.
Well, especially if she realized she could retreat and just go away.
Right.
Not, yeah.
But once she really got the hearing aids that will really give her the information that she needed to have, she could no longer retreat because she could close her eyes, but she still was getting the information. Just to give you a little story, today she has a master's degree. She teaches in a public school, and she never stops talking. She never stops. She's one of the most engaging people you will ever meet, and I think that's the language that changed this quiet child who wanted to retreat and not be bothered and didn't want to wear her hearing aids into someone who was very, very interactive, has a great understanding for other children who might have challenges similar to hers. And she's in a hearing school, we call it public school.
Sure.
Her speech has come to the point where everybody can understand her. It doesn't sound necessarily like yours or mine. And
but they can communicate and they can understand.
Oh yes, she's a model.
You know what a big problem is that we have? That is the community in many spaces and places is not ready to receive these children and adults, particularly in work settings. So we have in our high school, we have a Calvin Klein store and a Tommy Hilfiger store. We are very connected to PVH, which is the parent company and corporation. They help us set up these stores, and we set them up for vocational purposes.
You set up these stores?
Correct.
Okay.
And our students in the high school, going back to your original question about a story, these students go through these stores. We train them in terms of how they function in a retail setting. And I'll give you one great example. They went on an internship experience out to Tanger, out, in Suffolk County. They have the outlet stores, okay? They went there, and one of the things that they were asked to do was to help other people when they come in. So the store, the Calvin Klein store, sent in an anonymous customer.
Okay.
Okay? And our children failed. Okay? They did not know what to do. Okay? So we immediately backtracked. Okay? We set up a whole training program with videotapes, and we taught customer service.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
One of the things that we try and do, particularly at the high school, is make our students work ready, prepare them for the world of work. But Tommy, a big problem is that the world has to be prepared for them, to receive them.
Yeah.
Because it's not such an easy situation for a young person with a disability to get a job and maintain a job. Do you know that the statistic is about 80 or 85% that they get a job and fail? They can't maintain a job.
I thought you were referring to just how many folks are unemployed of the IDD or intellectually developmentally disabled population. That number is astronomical, but you're saying even once somebody gets a job, and that's because of the needed accommodations are not in place.
Right, they're not in place.
Yeah, yeah. I've had some conversations, and I want you to jump in those, Dr. Radziewicz, we did a webinar, seminar with the Queen's Chamber of Commerce with a bunch of actually, I think somebody from Tiegerman was one of your job coaches or was there, who was on that. And it's one thing to get folks that job, but if they don't get the support they need, they're not going to be able to stay in that.
Right, exactly right.
Yeah, and companies just are not educated enough. But I think, and it goes back to now, everybody has different abilities, right? But I could have used some accommodations at different parts of my life.
Of course.
And right, but I didn't know that at the time, right? But having 4 children, I'm aware of the opportunities in the school system that are available, but in jobs, there's so much more work to be done there. So you're right on about that. I know you had something to add too, Dr. Radziewicz, about that.
Well, I was just going to say, of course, we have our schools, our elementary school, our middle school, and our high school, but we also have our adult programming. And we have job coaches, and we just had a testimonial for one of our job coaches. The young woman that he was working with couldn't keep a job. She absolutely couldn't. She was isolating herself in the home, and he went with her every single day to her job. And he smoothed the way for her to be able to do her job, to do her work, and to make friends.
Right.
Well, this family was so grateful, and this girl wanted to be part of the testimony, thanking our job coach. She said her whole life changed.
This
This is,
young
I talk
woman.
about, moving inward.
Yeah.
We don't want our children to move or our adults to move inward. We want them to move outward. We want them to bloom.
Right, and that's where the language
That's
comes.
the language.
That's the language. That's the expression.
Well, it's also the language to say, I need help.
Yes.
Right? So
Yes.
so giving the opportunity, the gentleman you talked about who's at Stanford and he's going to change the world, neurophysics, right? Or nanophysics. So that means like
Nanophysics.
tiny, right? Like
Right.
little physics. He was able to verbalize what he needed and understand what he needed.
Absolutely.
I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I'm not figuring out self-regulation all that well.
Right.
Right? So I think we're all that work in progress, and to use language and say, here's what I need and here's what in his case, here's what I don't need. I don't need to walk into this class 2 minutes late when everybody's got eyes on me and things like that. I need to get there early. I wake up 4 kids for school every morning, and I know how difficult it is to wake up 4 kids and get them moving. So to take care of what you need to do and make sure you're prepared is
But
critically
that's
important.
the empowerment.
Yeah.
When we empower families, we empower the child with a language system. We give them the software program to go out into the world.
That's incredible. Yeah, we're almost out of time, and I don't want to rush us, but I want to get to a quick point. It's 40-year anniversary.
Yes.
What do you need? What goes on? And I'm seeing in the background. Actually, my friend is going to toss me something because it's not necessarily a requirement that people bring me gifts on the show, but it is appreciated that people bring me gifts. So this is my new long sleeve tee. Tell me about the 40th anniversary. What's upcoming? What do you need?
What do we need, Dr. Rad?
Well, we need people to celebrate with us.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
We need
Sponsors.
Our
Okay.
sponsors. We need family members to recognize that this really is indeed a wonderful celebration. We were there 40 years ago. We know what was available then and what's available today. And their children need to be celebrated. And I think that the families and the children are really part of this celebration.
That's awesome.
And we want the families to celebrate themselves and their children.
How do they celebrate? What are the opportunities to celebrate?
Well, we have activities that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months. We have a big gala that we're planning in May. We would like people to celebrate with us, come to our gala, make donations to Tiegerman. Maybe there's someone who might be interested in being on our board of directors.
Maybe there's
we
that.
would love to have you.
How do they? So
Okay.
who do they contact if they?
You can contact me at Tiegerman.
Okay. So they call the office.
Call the office. You
Okay.
can email me at etiegerman.org.
Okay.
Okay, etiegerman at tiegerman.org.
At tiegerman.org. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You can email me if you're interested in learning about the
How
program.
about this? If I said that some friends want to come for a tour, would you take them on a tour?
Yes, absolutely. Be happy to give them a
Thought so.
tour.
I thought you
We
might.
would love to see them come to the school
That's
and see
incredible.
what we're doing.
I
there.
got the tour just recently. I was out there. Dr. Jeremy took me on a tour just recently, about a month and a half ago. We took a cool picture. I like selfies. We'll take a selfie after the
Okay,
show today, but I
okay.
like selfies.
Tommy, excuse
Please.
me, I want to interrupt. Hold that up again.
Yeah.
Because one of our students
Design that.
Oh, is that
designed
right?
Designed it.
Everything that we're doing for this 40th,
Yeah.
our students are designing everything.
I love it. Folks, I can't believe it. That's how quick a conversation goes. We got to leave it there.
Okay.
Dr. Christine Radziewicz.
Thank you, Tommy.
Dr.
Thank you,
Ellenmorris
Tommy.
Tiegerman. Thank you both. Gang, this is Changemakers. I'm Tommy D. This is just another In Focus production. Make it a great day. See you later. Thanks. Bye.